Cloud. Great. Welcome, people in Zoom land. Can you hear me? Today is September 18th, 2020, and this is QM222. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. Can you see me?
Not really.
Not really. Let's try a different camera. Set up for the AV bridge. Is that better?
Yeah, we can see you.
Okay, welcome. So what we're going to do today is we're going to do a lecture called Advanced Excel. Let me bring up the class website and show you where we're going to be. Fetching my credentials. Hi. So friendly. Get started. So let me share the screen. Can you see? Can you see the class website?
Yeah, we
Great.
can see.
Perfect. So we're going to go to Resources, and under Resources, for data files, we need the very top one called actors.xls. So I'm going to. So usually you just click on it and open it. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick Save Link As, and I'm going to save it to my hard drive. Why? Because what we're going to do today is we're going to do today something called pivot tables. Pivot tables. And pivot tables, for some strange reason, does not run over the web very well. Many of the versions of the Mac and Excel, PC Excel, just don't do pivot tables on web files. You can do lots of things over the web with Excel, but pivot tables for many versions is not one of them. So you have to actually have the file resident on your hard drive. So I believe I downloaded it to Downloads, I hope. Yep. I downloaded it to download so I can open up actors.xls. And it looks beautiful. Angela Bassett is at the top. I have no idea who Angela Bassett is, but she's there. And then we're going to go to Resources. And the lecture we're going to do is number 5, Advanced Excel. And that's it for all I need from the class website today. So let me open up Advanced Excel and share with you a few slides. And hopefully you can see working with data, advanced Excel tools. So we're going to talk about pivot tables, and for a couple of minutes we're going to talk a little bit about histograms. If you look at some articles, this is an article from the Wall Street Journal. Basically it says, women overtake men as a majority of the US workforce. What does this mean? This article came from last year, actually it came from January 2020, not even last year, about 9 months ago. And if you read the article, and the article basically is down here in the notes section, down there in the notes section of the PowerPoint slide, what you'll see is that while many years ago men were the majority, before World War II it was primarily a male-dominated labor force, women stayed home. Today, the roles have been reversed. There are relatively more women physically working in the labor market than there are men. And the question is, does this mean there's no more discrimination in the labor force? If women are the majority, And part of that majority is women are now holding managerial jobs at greater and greater levels. The chance of your boss being a woman is quite high. I've worked at 2 universities. I've worked here for many decades, and I also worked at Ohio State for 23 years. And at Ohio State, I had 4 bosses, 2 of which were women and 2 of which were men. All right, so not totally uncommon. If this is 1950s and I said I worked at a job and 2 of my bosses were women over 23-year history and 2 were men, people would be, really? Wow, what kind of strange workforce. But today people are like, yeah, 50-50. It's about what happens. So what we're going to be investigating is discrimination in Hollywood. This is a data file. It's a little bit old. It's about 10 years old, and it contains data on male lead actors and female lead actors. So there's thousands and thousands of people in Hollywood who work in movies, but many of them are paid basically union minimum wage, which is pretty good. It's a couple of $100 for, per hour or so. I don't remember exactly what it is, but it's easy enough to Google what union scale is for a day of working on a Hollywood set. But this file only looks at the lead. So if you're the star billing, if you're number 1 or number 2 in the movie, this is how you get into the thing. So it's the people who appear, I don't know if anyone goes to see actual movies anymore, but on the marquee it would say the name of the movie and under it, starring somebody. So this is the stars. And what we're going to do is we're going to try and see the claim by actresses, are actresses discriminated against in the data set? So a quick show of hands, both online and in class. How many of you think in Hollywood, women are discriminated against financially? So I see 4 hands going up in class. I see about 19 people raise their hand, 20, 21 or so. So about 24 of you, so about 3/4 of you feel that women are financially discriminated against in Hollywood. All right, so one of these questions that we're going to ask in a couple of minutes, hopefully there'll be enough time for a breakout room, is while we're showing it statistically if there is or is not discrimination, if we do show statistically there is discrimination, what can we as managers do to eliminate the discrimination? What can we as managers do to that's going to be the big question. Does that make sense? So, okay, women are underpaid. We proved it. 95% or 99.7%, whatever the confidence interval you want. But what can you do to change the situation? And that's the interesting question. So we're going to talk a lot about pivot tables. And what are pivot tables? Pivot tables, and we'll go through all this in a second. Pivot tables are some of the most powerful tools in Excel. The idea of pivot, I don't know if you can see me on the camera, is you can quickly change positions. With a pivot table, you can quickly analyze data very different ways. What do I mean by quickly analyze data? I have a really good friend. We grew up together, went to junior high together, high school together. He was the best man at my wedding, blah, blah, blah. Still friends all these years later. And what does he do? He goes around and rescues hospitals. If your hospital kills a couple of patients and loses his accreditation, you call up him, he brings in his team, he gets your accreditation back. I mean, it doesn't just magically happen. He has to retrain all the staff. He has to ensure people don't get killed again, all that stuff, okay? Conversely, your hospital runs out of money, you go bankrupt. Yes, hospitals go bankrupt all the time. You're financially no idea how to handle things. You bring him and his team in, he comes in, he cleans up your books, he sets up structuring plans, gets you your accreditation back or things like that. So this is what he does. He rescues failing hospitals, or excuse me, he tries. Not every hospital that's failing can be rescued. Some of them basically have to be terminated because they're extremely helpless. One of the hospitals he rescues a couple of years ago was in the greater Washington, D.C. area. I don't want to be more specific than that. Could be Southern Maryland, Eastern Virginia, could be D.C. itself, somewhere in there. And this hospital had both financial and medical problems. A federal judge was appointed to oversee this hospital, and the judge said, I have a new idea. Instead of you presenting every month voluminous reports and giving me all these stacks, every Friday afternoon, come into my chambers and you answer my questions. So what do? He brought in his laptop, he connected the laptop up, via the internet to the hospital database, and the judge would say, so how are we doing on, error rates? And he'd say, hang on a second, Judge, and the judge would go back reading whatever he was reading, and he'd sit there with pivot tables and whip up a pivot table or a pivot graph. We'll do both today. And he'd say, okay, Judge, and he'd show the judge on the wall of his office. You know, they had a little Pico. You ever see the little Pico projectors? Sort of like the one hanging here in the ceiling, but they're really small. They're about the size of a pack of cigarettes. Not that anyone smokes anymore, but you know, about this big, about 3 times bigger than a cell phone. And he'd show the judge pictures on the wall, and the judge would go, oh, that's good, or that's bad, we need to work on this, you and your team need to work on this. And basically they were able to get, because they worked directly with the judge, and as the judge asked questions in real time, he was able to answer the judge's questions in real time. They were able to get the hospital out of bankruptcy about twice as fast as normal. So the hospital came out of bankruptcy, I believe, in 8 months instead of about 18 months, which was pretty good. Bad for my friend, because that meant his contract ended. He had to go find out work, but there's plenty of hospitals always in trouble, so he wasn't too worried about that. But good for the hospital, because it was no longer being overseen by a judge. Pivot tables. You can basically sit there in a meeting on the fly, analyze the data, and say, well, I know that's your point, but, and you flip your laptop around and say, here's what the data say. And someone goes, oh, all right, maybe we're not going to go that way. So let's talk about exactly how to do it. Everybody have a rough idea why pivot tables are important? You can quickly analyze the data. So I'm going to stop sharing this PowerPoint slide, and I'm going to bring up Excel and actors.xls. But let me just real quickly show you the slides, because in this learn from anywhere situation, flipping back and forth between slides and Excel takes a lot of time. So let me just quickly go through the slides, go back to Excel, and then do it slowly. So if you're like, what the heck is he doing in the next 2 minutes? I'm just flipping through the slides, and then I'll repeat everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a gender pivot table. What's the idea of a gender pivot table? Step number 1, we're going to figure out how many men and women are in the data file. How many men and women are in the data file are the first thing we want to do. So we're going to specify a range. I'm going to talk about moats. What's a moat? Just watch. We'll talk about that in a second. We're going to pick a layout. After we pick the layout, we're going to drag things to the rows, and we're going to drag things to the values. And then we're going to talk about exactly what we're doing. All right? And then I'm going to end with this particular slide, 18, 48, 66 total, and then I'm going to say bad news. Never end like this. Why? Because the golden rule of pivot tables is stay away from absolutes. Why stay away from absolutes? I've probably given this particular lecture and this one slide here at least 40 times at Questrom. And I'll be honest, I still have no idea how many men and women are in the data file. I have to look and go, oh yeah, 18 females, 48 men. You think a guy with a PhD who's really smart could remember 18 and 48 after giving this lecture 40 times? Nah. Instead of giving absolutes, what do? Give it percentages. By giving it percentages, people easily remember and talk about that. And for the life of me, I can't remember 18 and 48 without looking down right now at my slides. But I can remember this file has 25% women, actually 27, and 75%, okay, it's actually 73% men. It's 1/4 to 3/4. That I've remembered since the very first time I've given this lecture. People remember percentages. People don't remember absolutes. If you remember anything from this particular lecture, try and present as much data as possible in percentages. Sometimes bosses are like, I need the absolute numbers. Great, put up the absolute numbers in the column, but right beside it in the next column, put up the percentages and only talk about percentages. You've satisfied your boss, but you've got your information across. All right, let me stop, bring up Excel, and I'll just do all those slides a little bit slower so everyone goes, ah, I see what he's doing. Any questions before I begin? It's Friday. Can you see Excel?
Yes.
Great. Perfect. Step number 1, when opening up any Excel file for the very first time, can you read a couple of lines in simple words. I speak English, so can you read it in English? You might speak any other language. You might speak Spanish, you might speak French, you might speak Mandarin. You know, it doesn't matter what language you speak, but can you read a line or two and translate it? Could somebody in Zoom land tell us your name and shout out a random number between 6 and 25, somebody who does not participate a lot?
My name's Kira. 10.
Which number was it again, Kira?
10.
10. Thank you very much. Rizvik, give Kira some class contribution. Excellent job, Kira. Line 10 is Whoopi Goldberg. I don't know how many of you ever heard of Whoopi Goldberg. Anybody? A few of you are nodding. Great. So the name is Whoopi Goldberg. Great. We know the person's name. The gender is F. F means fine, right? Fantastic. What do you think, Kira? Does the gender F mean fine and fantastic?
Yeah, I guess female too.
Female. Female. Excellent. Nice job, Kira. All right. Domestic gross is 32. Any guess, Kira, on what 32 tells us?
$32 million.
Right, that's what it says in cell A3. So domestic gross, this particular movie with Whoopi Goldberg sold $32 million worth of tickets at the domestic US box office. 32 million. I don't know if that's good or bad. We can find out with a pivot table in a minute by looking at all these other movies. Foreign gross is 33. Kira, you want to give us a guess on what foreign gross is, given domestic gross is ticket sales in the United States?
That would be international sales in the millions.
Sales, 33 million. Thank you, Kira. Please pat yourself on the back, either left or right side, doesn't matter, okay? And last but not least, salary, 10.
10 million.
You got $10 million for doing this movie. Nice. Kira, have you gotten $10 million for doing a movie?
I have not.
You have not. Yeah. So Kira, I have a daughter. She's old now. Not old. She'd be freaked out if I said old. But when she was really little, you know, and she was probably like second or third grade, she was like, "Daddy, I want to be a movie star." And I was like, "Well, your father's in movies all the time. I'm in like 50 movies a year." And she's like, "Really? Can we see them?" And I said, "Sure." And I showed her one of these QM222 videos. And she's like, "That's not the kind of movie I meant." I said, "It's a movie. I don't get $10 million a year like Whoopi Goldberg. I got $10 million a film, not a year, okay? But hey, I'm a movie star." She was very disappointed. She thought I was in something like Walt Disney, you know? All right, thank you, Kira. You're off the hook for the rest of today unless you want to volunteer again. All right? So it's pretty straightforward to translate all these kind of things. I'm just going to jump down to the bottom by holding down the control down arrow key. And what we see is people like Tom Hanks is an M, male. He's got a movie domestically grossed $166 million. Woo! Nice, if you can get it. Foreign, $182 million, and he was paid 17.5. He was paid $7.5 million more than Whoopi was for that movie. Okay? So, step one, can you translate the data? Step two, to create a pivot table, what we need to do is make sure there's a moat around the data. What is a moat? Have you ever seen a castle with some like water surrounding it? That is what a moat is. Because if you put your cursor anywhere inside the moat, so it doesn't matter whether I put my cursor here or here or here or here, doesn't really matter. As long as it's inside the moat, Excel will automatically create a pivot table for that area. So we do have an automatic moat. What you see is you see a blank line here at the top. You see a blank column down here on the side. And at the very bottom, there is a blank line. Now, you don't have to necessarily have a blank line at the top. We could, for example, get rid of these top lines here if I hit delete, though unfortunately, Rithvik, any idea how to move this bar down to the bottom?
Yeah, there should be a, if you have a bar, just hold it.
There it is. Excellent. Thank you, Rithvik. You're hired again next semester if you want the job. So, I'm being serious. So we just highlight all this, we could hit delete, and part of the note could be the top line, that A, B, C, D, and it can also be the left side or the right side or the bottom of the file. So the sides of the file also are equal to a blank line for a note. I'm going to hit undo. First, you need a moat. Second, you need one line at the top of your data. And that line has to be some kind of labels. The labels do not have to make any sense. You could have A, B, C, D. You could have a bunch of periods, question marks, exclamation points. You could have any character. You just need something at the top. I highly recommend in a business setting you have labels that make sense. But there's no Excel requirement that they make sense. You get the picture? So you put anything you want in business, you should put something that is sensible. Put our cursor anywhere in the data with a row of headers, not 2 rows, not 3 rows, just 1 row. We pick insert, and under insert on the left side is tables, and under tables, we'll pick pivot table instead of recommended pivot table, where recommended means Excel makes its best guess. Do not let Excel make its best guess in business. You don't like it, it's not pretty. The range, if you have a moat, automatically surrounds all the data. Ooh, that's cool. What if you don't have a moat? It's a giant data file, it's gonna take you hours to create a moat. Then you could actually hand code in the table and range. Let me tell you, having hand coded a number of table and ranges, this is where I make a lot of mistakes. A moat, you don't make mistakes. Hand coding, it's ugly, ugly. Last, where do you want to put the pivot table? In a new worksheet or an existing worksheet? Let's just let it use the defaults on a new worksheet. All right, I've gone pretty fast. Are there any questions from the people on Zoom? Say that again?
No.
No questions? Any questions? Studio audience. We'll pick OK. Go ahead.
It didn't do that for me when I pressed pivot. It didn't like highlight the entire thing. It just brought another sheet.
Brought another sheet. Tell me a little bit more about what another sheet is.
Like it just brought another tab that said sheet 1 when I pressed pivot table like that. But when I go back to the data sheet, it didn't like highlight or box the entire thing like how yours did. You have to highlight it all before you do it?
No, you should just be able to put it anywhere in. Let me ask you a quick question. How many of you put your cursor anywhere inside the moat and then got it to highlight like I did? Please raise your hand online. So we have 100% in class, and the numbers are steadily climbing. So Gunsha, one of the possibilities is you go into a breakout room with Rithvik and you share your screen with him. I believe I've set up so anyone can share screens.
Oh yeah, it wasn't me who asked the question.
Oh, sorry. Well, whoever asked the question, if you could chat with Rithvik and go off into the breakout room, I think he might be able to solve your problem. Because Rithvik, I'll be honest, is an Excel genius. Okay, since most of us look like something on my screen, what we're going to do here now is we need to fill in this right side pivot table. And we have, why do we need labels on the top? So that we have a series to pick. So we have a series to pick. And we have name, gender, domestic gross, foreign gross, salary, and so on. What we want to do is we count the number of people. So I'm going to drag gender to the rows. And when I drag gender to the rows, I get F and M, fantastic, and men. I'm smiling underneath my mask. I could drag gender to the columns, and I get F. Go ahead. Was there a question? I could drag gender to the columns and put it F and M this way, but we'll follow along with the PowerPoint and put gender in the rows. There's really no difference. And now what I'd like to do is count how many men and women there are. So let's say I'm going to drag gender to the values. I've dragged gender to the values. And what came up for me is 18 women and 48 men. Remember, we're trying to figure out discrimination, but right now let's walk first, like how many people are in the data file before we start trying to prove discrimination. Once again, absolutes, 18 and 48 are tough to remember. Percentages are easier to remember. There are a number of different ways of getting percentages. The easiest way, and the one that I typically use, is to just hand calculate the percentages. Equal B4 divided by, and you could either type 66 or you could give the cell reference B6. Equal B5 divided by B6. Always, 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 yes, I said that always 3 times. Always format your numbers. Why? Because when you have numbers that look this precise, you are telling the viewer, I know with absolute precision. When you have things to 8 decimal places, you are screaming, this is the number. I don't know how many of you took chemistry or physics, and in physics you were given all these constants, Planck's constant, Avogadro's numbers, things like that in high school you had to memorize for like 12 decimal places, because some physicist or group of physicists spent years of their life trying to measure this number super precisely, and the whole universe is based on it. We're looking at movie sales. We're looking at about 70 people. How many lead actors and actresses are there in the world? Are there more than 70? Yes. Can we say with extreme precision, 27.2777% of all lead actresses are female? Nah, this is just like a rough sample. Less precision says, yeah, this is just this particular data set. More precision says, this is the number the universe is based on. Home, percent. Nothing after the decimal place. Why? Because anything after the decimal place says, I believe this is a precisely measured number. And I'm trying to tell you it's not. Make sense? Second way of doing this. Put our cursor here in anywhere in the cursor, in the area. And I can right click. And after I right click on it, I can pick show value as, and I got a bunch of choices like percent of grand total. What did I just do? Once again, undo. I put my cursor anywhere in the column, right click, show value as percent of the grand total. Undo. Another way of doing it, there's this little count of gender button here. I pull down on it. I pick value field settings, and under value field settings on the right side, show value as, calculation, percent of grand total. Let me undo that. What did I just do? I pulled down on count of, I picked value field settings, show value as, grand total. Why did I hand calculate the numbers first? Because it's easy. There's nothing to remember. It's like this cell divided by this cell. Trivial. For someone like me who's not the smartest guy in the room, okay, Rithvik is, for someone like me, it's real simple to remember. All this right-clicking and where is it hiding? Is it under this or that? After a while, I forget where these things are. So there's lots of ways of doing this in Excel, some simple, some complicated. But the key idea is very simple. Show results in percentages without lots of decimal places. I'm going to stop here. Usually there's a bunch of questions. Tell me your name.
Kevin.
Kevin.
Yeah.
Kevin in the studio audience is saying something.
So for the B, the column B, we're supposed to do percentage of grand total, correct? Just to make sure that's what we're doing.
In this example, we're doing percentage of grand total. It might not be. not always is it percent of grand total.
Just asking for this example.
So this one, percent of grand total,
That's it.
not always.
No.
Sometimes it's percent of just this total, because maybe you have multiple columns on it. There's all different ways of cutting and slicing it. One person just did either a hand share or a chat or something. I just saw a more go.
It's spelled out wrong for Mac or something on it.
It's an I?
Yeah.
Tell me that again. I, what?
Yeah, for next to counter gender, you don't have a drop down arrow, you have to click the I and then you have options.
I have to click the I. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Let's jump back to the slideshow for a second. We'll do a few more slides, and then we'll come back to Excel. So we've done the converting the data into percent on that slide. Now what we want to do is we want to see who sells more tickets outside the United States. Is it men or women? Are men and women, or women leads more popular outside the US? How do we create this pivot table? So what we're going to do is first we're going to do male and female, and then instead of counting men and women, we're going to look at foreign gross. Foreign gross. Okay? And then we're going to come up with a second idea, and the second idea is format, 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 in particular format with signs. If we're talking about money, put in dollar signs, euro signs, yen signs, RMB signs, lira signs. It doesn't matter what you're doing, but you know, try and give some kind of unit so people have a rough idea what's going on. And here is the takeaway slide, which is easier to understand. And I would say we could even improve the numbers in the bottom right corner. Let's do it again. Let me stop sharing that. Share screen Excel. I'm going to pick data. Step one, put my cursor anywhere inside the moat. Insert pivot table. Is the blinking range correct? Data A5 through E71? I would say yes. That is where my data are located. Click OK. And now what I like to do is drag down gender to the rows, and to the values I want to know outside the United States. And what I got was I got something called sum of foreign gross. What does this number tell us? Highlight the data. Let's pick home. Under home, this is US dollars, so I'm going to pick dollars. Do we need 2 decimal places? I would say no, given the 2 decimal places is 0. And remember that these numbers are in millions. So this little 5 over here on the right side is $5 million. And what is this 1?
Billion.
1 billion. Thank you. Who said that?
Grincha.
Thank you. Please give Gunsha some class contribution. So what does this say in simple words? If I'm standing there in front of a group of investors, what would I say? I'd say, women's lead movies took in how much money? Anybody?
1,500,000.
Just $1 billion. Took in about 1 billion there. Hey, that's it. About 1 billion. Male lead movies took in about
3.5.
3.5. Round, round, round. Will you remember 1 billion and 3.5 billion so you can tell somebody at lunch today? I think maybe 50-50 shot. 3,473,000,000. 0 chance you remember that number for lunch today. And lunch is only an hour and a half from now. I'm being serious. Some people are like, oh, he just keeps harping on this. The whole goal is information transfer. You did all this work, you learned pivot tables, you calculated the number, and no one remembers it an hour later. You failed in your job in the business world. You want people in the business world to remember you and remember you positively, and you want people in the business world to remember what the heck you're saying. Because you are important. You are important, and what you say is important. But how you say it ensures whether people remember it or not. You're also important, and all of you online, okay? I'm not trying to just pick on the two of you. Questions? So we can do things besides count men and women. Let's jump back to the PowerPoint slides. Comments make more information more easier. There's better formatting, great. Let's create a two-dimensional table. What's the idea of a two-dimensional table? We want to now get into this discrimination idea. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a table that looks something like this. We're going to put salary in the rows. We're going to put gender in the columns. And we're going to see how many people are in each group. And I'm then going to say, this table is unreadable. And since I've just been harping on make sure people remember what the heck you're talking about, how do you make this table readable? The very first lecture, we had a lecture on how much information people can retain. Can somebody in Zoom land remind me of my key numbers? There were two key numbers from that first lecture.
5 to 9.
5 to 9, that's the range. Or 7 plus or minus 2, restated it this other way, okay? 5 to 9, excellent job. Who was that? So Rick can mark it up.
Jacob.
Excellent. So people can only remember a little bit in short-term memory. So what we're going to do is we're going to group the salaries together. We're going to do group and outline. Group and outline, we're going to compress things. And we're going to compress things into nice, simple groups. And what we're going to end up with is, hang on, let me count it off the screen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 numbers. We're going to end up with 7 numbers, excluding the totals on the side. But in the center of the table, 7 numbers, which is right in our sweet spot. Make sense? And then we'll analyze the table, and what is the table going to say? Whoa, how come there's no women up in the top ranks? How come all the women are sort of stuck down to the very bottom? Is that discrimination? And I'll ask you that very question in a minute. Everyone see where we're going? Let's take our journey together. Woo! Put our cursor anywhere in the moat. Pick insert. Tables, pivot table. Click OK. Now what I'd like to do is I'd like to put gender in the columns, male and female, and then I'd like to put salary in the rows. The question oftentimes pops up is, Professor, how come you didn't do it the other way around? How come you didn't put salary in the columns and gender in the rows? Why? In North America, which way do we hold pieces of paper? Portrait mode, like this. We rarely do landscape mode. So what does that mean? When you have two variables, the variable with the more dimensions goes on the rows, and the shorter variable, where I mean by short is fewer dimensions, go in the columns, because it fits on paper nicely. If you're working in a country that writes primarily across, guess what you do? The variable with more dimensions goes along the columns, and the shorter dimension goes along the rows. Make it easy for people. Do not have people reading your books or your pamphlets or your PowerPoint slides and then having to flip them. Make them just keep going, yep, 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 and turning the same page. Simple. Clear rule? Okay, let's drag salary back to the rows, gender back to the columns. And let's count how many people, how many men and women get each salary. So I'm going to drag gender to the values. And what does this say? I'll click on a row like 9. There were 2 females and 3 men who had a $4 million salary. Let's click on another row like row 14. There were 4 men and no women who got $7 million. However, $6 million, 1 woman, 4 men. Really hard to read because look at all these things. It keeps going down. Wow, look at all those cells. So many cells. There looks to be roughly 50 cells to analyze. My brain hurts. Compress it. Click on the rows. There. Right click. Halfway down is the word group. I clicked on 7.5 and now I'd like to click on group. Can you see the word group? No? Click once on the table on some number like 5.5. Right click, group. Anybody in Zoomland having problems? Sounds like a great movie, Zoomlander.
I don't think this works on Mac.
Say again? So it looks different. Some people are picking control and then right clicking and it's coming up as group. Any other helpful hints for getting these? Some Macs work just like I'm doing it and some Macs don't. This is the joys of Excel. Every version is slightly different. Anybody having problems? Still can't get it. Yep, perfect, perfect. You're there. So I pick grouping, it says start at and ending at. Okay? Do we want to start at 2? Let's start at 2. Let's do the Excel default just real quick, okay? We'll pick OK. And we get groups 2 to 3, 3 to 4, 4 to 5, 5 to 6. Yes. Do we compress the table a little bit? I would say yes. Is the table readable? I would say no. Excel defaults are dumb, D-U-M-B. Or as we spell it in my family, dumb, D-U-M. That's a joke. You're spelling dumb wrong. That makes you dumb. Never mind. What should you do when looking for breaks? Use nice round numbers that people think in. Excel will come up with bizarre breaks like, you know, $1.75 million. People don't think in $1.75 million breaks. My recommendation, 0 to 20 by 5. Did they earn less than 5 million? Did they earn between 5 and 10 million? 10 and 15, 15 and 20. Those are nice simple numbers that people remember. Maybe it's 0 to 10, I don't know. But use nice numbers that everyone goes, uh-huh, uh-huh, uh-huh. How do you find nice simple numbers? Ask a roommate or a friend at lunch or dinner. If they go, yeah, that makes sense, and want to go immediately on to another conversation, you have a nice break. If they look at you like, what are you talking about? You failed. Go back and find other breakpoints, okay? So what do we have here? We have 10 women earned between 0 and 5 million, 9 men. Once again, we have an absolute table. Absolute tables are really tough to understand. I got to sit there and count and compare. What do I want to do? I want to do it as percent. I could do it by hand, but let's just click here once, right click, and pick show value as. Now, here's our interesting thing. If we pick percent of grand total, and we get rid of all these stupid decimal places, look at those decimal. Did the decimal places add anything? They just make things confused. So let's get rid of it. Home. By picking percent of grand total, I see that 15% of women out of all the people. That's a little weird because the grand total is 27%. Here's a case where you might want to look at percent of column total. So we can compare the male column to the female column. Here's where you might want to pick show value as percent of column total. And what we see is among the lowest paid men, 19% were in that low category, 0 to 5 million. But more than half, for those who like precision, 56%, but more than half of all women are in the lowest paid category. Among men, a quarter. For those who like precision, 23%. A quarter of all men are in that ridiculous 15 to 20 million. The type of money I'll never see in my life, okay? They got it for one movie for like 4 months of work. I'm sure you'll see far more than this, but you know, college professors don't get paid $15 million to teach a course, all right? Women, none. That was a joke. Not about you seeing 15 million, but it's so hard to see people's reactions, you know? Okay, so what we just did is we did a two-dimensional table. Make sense? A little bit? So what I'd like to do right now is, for those of you following on the slides, I'm on slide 27. Well, yeah, I know, I'm still sharing the Excel. What I'd like to do is just look at the average salary for men and women by domestic gross. So what I'd like to do is average salary for men and women by domestic gross. I'm going to pick home, sorry, I'm going to pick insert, table, pivot table, and to do average salary, I'm going to put gender. I'm going to drag domestic gross to the values, and that says sum, but I want the average. Oh, sorry. Let's try it again. Drag domestic gross there, and what I'd like to do is put salary in the values, and I'd like to put average salary. There's a whole bunch of Excel functions like average, max, min, product. So we'll do average. We'll pick OK. And we can look down the very bottom. We can reformat these numbers. And we can see for the typical woman, they earn about $6.1 million to be a lead in a movie. And a typical male earns $9.5 million to be a lead in the movie. Yes, right now there seems to be statistical discrimination. Women are only paid, and I say the word only, $6 million, while men are paid closer to $10 million. I leave you in my last 30 seconds before the weekend begins with the question, what can we do about it? It's a little hard to be upset when people are earning $6 million, but there is fairness when others are earning $10 million for roughly doing the same kinds of thing. I'll stay around for those who want to chat about discrimination and what you can do about it. For the rest of you, it's 11 o'clock. Thank you very much for listening. Have a wonderful and safe weekend, and try not to get infected at any party, because I want to keep teaching.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for taking the class.
Thank you, Professor.